Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for coming today. We're delighted to be here to speak about trust, data protection, and regulatory compliance. This is a very important topic for Google Cloud, a very important topic for our customers. Today, I have the honor to co-present with Anton Tkachov. Anton is Director of Cloud Security at PwC. So PwC is one of our strongest partners, but also one of the largest Google Cloud customers. In fact, they have conducted possibly the most comprehensive risk assessment in the history of Google Cloud. So thank you for coming.
Okay, thank you. And today I'm presenting with Nathaly, who is Head of Data Protection and Compliance for EMEA in Google. Every time I think about, if I want to have a conversation about technology-enabled compliance at scale, I call Nathaly. So really excited to be here with you today.
Okay, so our presentation has 3 sections today. First, Anton is going to talk you to how to enable a secure and compliant cloud transformation. Then I'm going to be talking about how are we supporting your compliance journey to the cloud. And finally, we're going to give you some practical tips and takeaways. With this, Anton, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Right, so I'm a Director of Security Architecture in PwC Financial Services. What it means that every time our security teams are dispatched to work with clients on a variety of cloud security-related engagements, I get to be involved. So I see what's going on in the market, and it gives me a great opportunity to understand what are the challenges that clients are facing every day. And the challenges vary, but when I had a conversation with Nathaly and we thought about what could be, if we could change one thing in a way customers tackle trust, security, and compliance in the cloud, what would that thing be? And today I want to talk to you about that. But kind of before we jump into cloud and change, and I'd like to talk to you about change in general first, like what it means. So if you think about the model like this, I think it's a psychology model that was developed to understand how people go through grief, but it could be applied to any change. If you think about stages of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, this is how I think about any change. I'm moving an office now. Well, I was told I'm moving an office, so obviously a bit of denial at the beginning. Then there was an element of anger about not being to go to my favorite coffee shop. I think I'm in the stage of bargaining now, where I'm talking to the people and saying, why don't I spend a few days here and a few days there? But at the end of the day, I'll pack up my stuff and I will accept the change and I'll move to the new office. And if you think about cloud adoption, which is also a big change for an organization, people go through the same phases. And if you remember, in about maybe 2010, so I was working for a large system integrator, and every time I would talk to security folks about cloud adoption, they would be in a bit of a denial about it. I'm sure many of you heard from your security counterpart back in the days, cloud is not going to happen. Our workloads are so sensitive. We are processing core data. It's not going to move to cloud. Nobody wanted to hear about public cloud, even cloud in general. Nobody kind of took really seriously. But then kind of situation moved along the chain. We started to hear about, okay, you're doing something, I'm going to escalate. And then later on, there was some compromises made, and people started to talk about, well, how do we adopt the cloud, but not really adopt the cloud? And, a lot of people these days, a lot of security professionals are accepting cloud and public cloud, and even becoming champions of it. If I look at the market and kind of stakeholders that I deal with when I talk to my clients, CISO and so-called first line of defense, people probably running security operations centers, they're already way past the acceptance phase. They are accepting and embracing clouds because it gives them the opportunity to do security analytics and things like they wouldn't be able to afford in their traditional data center model. However, heads of compliance, kind of second line risk are still in a bit of a bargaining phase. I just recently, a couple of months ago, I was talking to a chief risk officer in a payment service provider organization. And when we started to discuss the approach to compliance and how they're adopting cloud, I've heard that the cloud is permitted within the organizational information security policy. However, only infrastructure as a service. And the condition is that all of the agents that we have in our spaghetti data center also move to the cloud. And that was quite interesting to hear, because it's not really about adopting cloud. It's just moving boxes to somebody else's data center. So that was an interesting approach. And I think last year, about this time, I ran a bit of a survey to understand what is the real reason why second line of defense, privacy and compliance professionals still going through that journey and still not championing the cloud adoption. And I've heard different things. I've heard the incorrect operating model, and people are not reporting to privacy, focuses on security. There is a misalignment of priorities. People are kind of closing gaps and not spending enough time understanding the key business data flows and mapping out privacy legislations. I've heard about lack of communications a lot. It's like people thinking that development teams are running and doing their own thing. But I don't think it's the reason. Somewhat, there are all valid reasons, but the real reason, I think, is about the lack of translation. So security objectives and requirements, PCI, DSS, NIST, ISO 20000, anything you think of, need to be translated in a cloud-native language. I recently had a conversation with, so I was doing a global assessment, it's a security assessment. We flew around and spoke to a bunch of people in an organization. And it was time to meet a head of development. And he said to me, look, there's no point of you doing like a detailed assessment. I can tell you right now, you're probably going to think that we have a bunch of issues, because I can right now show you reports from internal audit, external audit, a bunch of risk assessments that all scream red, we have a problem. But the real challenge is nobody told me what needs to happen in a cloud world. People talk to me about monitoring servers, but I run serverless infrastructure, so there are no box to put a syslog engine in. We spin up additional Kubernetes clusters during the Christmas period to allow for additional workloads and catering for increased spends within the organization, within the government. So what are you going to do forensically investigate in January? Because all of my machines will be spun down. There is no network taps. Another great example that he gave me, his network teams and network security kind of thinking about how do we apply network security taps and IDSs into the cloud. You can't really do that because all the networks are software defined. And while you can achieve the objectives, you need to do it in a very different way. So he told me that he doesn't understand what needs to happen in his environment to really ensure compliance, security, trust, and privacy, because nobody translated it into the language he understands. And I kind of tend to agree with that. I think there is definitely a need for a security architecture capability to take the requirements of NIST, PCI DSS, and ISO and translate it in the world of Kubernetes, pods, nodes, etc. It is a big challenge that I see across many clients. Security teams are, still getting trained on the cloud language. Many of them are not coming from development background, so they still need to learn. And there is a lot of aspects to consider when building security architecture function. I've seen a lot of clients putting them in security team reporting to CISO, Some of them are hiring kind of ex-developers and putting them right in the middle of development organization on the development floor. And some are thinking more about strategic cloud-enabled kind of organization, and they're putting them into enterprise technology organizations. There's a lot of things to consider when making the choice. And obviously, the contractor market has a lot of people at the moment working in the tribe space. They would, there are ex-developers who really understand security and great at writing a secure code. They would be deployed to an agile tribe and really start implementing requirements day one. So they're extremely effective. They are expensive, but in terms of the scope of influence, these guys struggle because they can only influence the developers around them. They can't look at broader organizational transformation. If you want to make sure that your security architecture can think strategically, you'd need to find somebody who could fit into your enterprise technology team. But the challenge with those guys, I found, that it takes them months and months to learn about the organization, build the required relationships, to really start enabling the transformation, not just fixing the product that they look at, this week. Finding these guys, obviously, is extremely difficult. So a lot of my clients are asking us to come up with a career path, almost like for these architects. Let's say we find one, how do we make sure that they're effective day one, they learn and become very useful addition to a CISO team, but also have the link in the business so they could help organization adopt the cloud properly, not just move software from traditional data center into the cloud. So I guess the key outcome for me when I looked at the organizations and we're coming up with the operating model is to make sure we find an architect and we don't just put them into an organization tactically, but we plan a 10-year career plan for them to make sure that they deliver value at the very beginning, but also grow within the organization and can become the enterprise security architect that everyone needs. So we talked about the challenge of lack of translation of requirements. I've described the solution of finding that architecture capability and the right person that can help you translate all the old requirements into the new cloud native language. But that would only be half of the coin. Let's say you find the right person, you deploy them in the right part of the organization, they design security patterns and really kind of help to explain developers what needs to be done. You would still need to find a partner that can help making sure the requirements for trust, privacy, and compliance can be met. And they also can be met in a way that can be easily demonstrated to your regulators. And this is a segue into what Nathaly is going to talk to us about. There you go.
Thank you, Anton. I really enjoyed the stages of grief. Now let's talk about how we can partner together to meet your regulatory compliance needs. How many of you know what GDPR stands for? That's about 80%, okay. Very good. So I'd like to start by highlighting that compliance is a shared responsibility, building in what Anton just indicated. And frameworks like GDPR help us understand this concept in practice. Let's see. There's some responsibilities that primarily rely on providers, on us. For example, security. As the custodians of the data, we are expected to deploy state-of-the-art security to protect the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of the data. We're also expected to keep customers in control when it comes to subcontracting the services. This is the sub-processor's obligations. Providers are also expected to offer certain contractual commitments around things like data use, data deletion, data portability, incident notifications, assistance obligations, and the like. But there is one fundamental responsibility that relies on the customer. And this is the obligation to conduct a risk assessment to determine whether that processor, that provider, offers appropriate technical and organizational measures. So today, I'm going to equip you to fulfill that responsibility and to conduct a risk assessment on Google Cloud. But before we go there, let's not forget that there's some responsibilities regarding the data itself that rely on the customer. Has the data that you're uploading to the cloud been obtained in a lawful manner? Do you have consent to run that marketing campaign if you need it? Is the data accurate? Think about it. So, what do we do to support your trust and compliance journey? So the first thing we do is we establish a solid foundation of trust. And here we use a three-pronged approach. The first prong is protection. We recognize that privacy is both a fundamental human right and a critical enterprise need. But privacy and security are two sides of the same coin. Data cannot be private if it's not secure. So security and privacy come first in everything we do. The second prong is control. We live by the premise that customers own their data, not Google. So we equip you with technology that puts you on the driver's seat when it comes to managing and protecting your data. The third prong is protection. We build world-class compliance capabilities to facilitate your compliance. How? By making sure that our services have, by default, the assurance, the certifications, and the contractual commitments that your regulators are expecting you to have. And this applies in horizontal areas like privacy and security, and then in vertical areas such as financial services, healthcare, government, and the like. So let's see some of the examples of our protection approach. First, we use technology for security at scale. We operate one of the largest backbone networks in the world. In fact, we have laid our own cables under the Pacific, and now we're doing the same under the Atlantic. Our private infrastructure gives the services high availability and resiliency, but they also reduce the attack surface when the data is no longer transiting the public internet. Strong encryption is inherent in the way we run our services. Data is encrypted in transit and addressed by default. And the way this happens is pretty unique. Data is chunked into different pieces. Then, I'll need help here. Then each chunk gets encrypted with a different key. Then the keys get encrypted, and then the different chunks and the encrypted keys get stored in different servers, in different data centers, in different jurisdictions. This is a little bit of a computing science miracle. Thank you. Thank you. So technology also helps us when it comes to fighting threats. We do have presence across virtually almost every jurisdiction and vertical in the world. And we also, at Google, we have around 8 consumer services with more than 1 billion users. So this global footprint gives us an unprecedented intelligence and visibility into threats and attacks and what's going on there, and also the ability to react very quickly to protect our customers. We also rely on some great talent. This is the unicorns that Anton was referring to. So Google employs more than 1,000 privacy and security professionals. These include one of the best information security talent in the world, the people that wrote the books on security. So they, together with our compliance and assurance and legal and policy teams, they together look after the protection of our cloud. Now, let's look at some examples of control, of the control prong. This is, again, the technology that puts you on the driver's seat when it comes to managing and protecting your data. Who has access to your data in the cloud is a big question. So things like Claude audit logs help you answer the question of who did what with your data within your organization. But how about Google access to your data? You have a legitimate expectation to control that. So access transparency, this feature gives you near real-time visibility into the rare cases where support or engineering personnel access your data. You get logs that show things like what resource was accessed, the justification, the time, and even the office location of the person that made the access. But going further, to give you more control into access to your data, you can manage your own encryption. And I want to bring up something that was announced yesterday for GCE and BigQuery. This is 2 groundbreaking features. The first is External Key Manager. This means that you can have your own keys living completely outside of the Google infrastructure in a separate box. So Google doesn't have access to the keys. Now, the second feature is key justification. So every time Google is requesting a key to decrypt your data, you'll get notice and a reason for that, and the ability to deny that request. So the combination of these 2 features give you an unprecedented amount of control and oversight that was not available in the cloud industry so far. Data residency is also an important aspect of control. So data location is not a regulatory requirement under major frameworks like GDPR, and you know that. However, we continue to invest in adding cloud regions and zones and features like G Suite regions. The idea is that you have choice and control regarding the location of your data, and you have the ability to store data in Europe. Now, let's see some examples of our compliance approach. Our privacy and security practices attain to some of the most stringent frameworks in the world. An example of this is GDPR. As you know, this is the most significant piece of privacy legislation introduced in the last 20 years. Google Cloud adopted GDPR as the privacy bar globally, not only in Europe. International standards are also a pillar of our compliance approach. How? Well, we have adopted 27001. As you know, this is the golden standard for information security. Actually, this is the most successful standard in the history of ISO. That is the baseline. We have also adopted 27017, which is the cloud security specific standard. And it captures things that are nuanced or particular to the cloud, like data logical separation of data or virtualization. So you get that component as well, the flavor of the cloud and security. We have also adopted 27070 AT. This was the first privacy standard for cloud computing. And actually, if you read it, it looks like pretty similar to GDPR, and it was approved before GDPR. Actually, the French Data Protection Authority was heavily involved in the drafting of this standard. It was the first time that the whole world, not only Europe, agreed on a common global standard for privacy in the cloud. Last but not least, I'm happy to announce that we will be soon certifying against 27701. This is the first standard for privacy management, not only controls, but how you manage privacy within an organization. Regional standards are also an important portion of how we support our customers' compliance journey. Some recent European examples include Germany, the C5 certification for cloud security, the FINMA attestation for the financial services community in Switzerland, the HDS certification in France to host health data governed by French law, and the UK security principles. The list goes on. That was the foundation of trust. But what else are we doing to support your compliance? So we deliver full transparency so that you can conduct a meaningful risk assessment on our practices. And the idea is, number one, that you can understand where we are with respect to your unique requirements. And I say unique because they will depend on the countries you operate, depends on the type of customers you have, on your vertical or your internal policies, but you need to understand where we are. And the second is you can determine whether the protections that we offer are adequate or not. And at the end of the day, it's a matter of where you are in security. If you're here and your provider is here, then that move to the cloud is probably a reasonable decision. If you're here and your provider is here, then that's certainly not the right decision from the risk and compliance perspective. But if you're here in security and your provider is here, then that's probably the right choice when it comes to risk management. So first, we offer transparency into our contractual commitments. In fact, you can search this online, it's in our website. These are our data privacy commitments to our cloud customers. These have been created with feedback from customers and regulators over the years. The intention is to make your life easy and to incorporate things like you're likely looking for and your regulator is likely looking for. They are available globally, not only in Europe, and then get also regularly updated. The last major update was GDPR. As you know, GDPR contains very specific provisions that you need to put in the contract. And also the most recent for Brexit, we're accounting for the possibility of the UK leaving the EU and saying things like, hey, when we say GDPR, we also mean the UK version of the GDPR. So you can continue to rely on the commitments and for things like the international data transfer mechanism we offer. So these include commitments like processing restrictions. We can only use data in order to provide the services and to protect it, period. Not for advertising, not for anything else. We also commit to, for example, delete data within a set period of time from both live systems and backups. There's organizations that don't ever set retention periods in their own on-premise systems. So processors. Google conducts the vast majority of the processing, but what if we use vendors? We do use some vendors, and an example is technical support in many languages. So we offer a commitment to notify you of who they are, what they do, where they are located, even before we onboard them. Data incident notification. What if Google suffers a breach? We hope that's not the case, but what if it happens? That's the reason why you're moving to the cloud, to have more security. But we offer that contractual commitment because, one, you have a right to know. And the second, you may have an obligation to notify your customers or your regulators. And by the way, this is a new obligation under GDPR, data breach notifications, but we've been offering these commitments for many years. Last but not least, data protection team. I'm proud to have members of data protection team here today. So you have a dedicated channel, an assistant channel in which you can direct your privacy, security, and compliance questions anytime, and we'll jump and help. We also offer transparency into our operations. We have a stream of white papers with details on our security design choices. A few recent examples include our overall infrastructure, encryption at rest, encryption in transit, data deletion in our cloud, data incident response process. When you have this type of detailed information, you can make the decisions and the determinations yourself on whether what we're doing on security is adequate or not. We also offer transparency into our infrastructure. In that this means that we give you visibility into the locations of the data centers. I've mentioned that we also give our customer choice and control, but we also give you visibility into the reasons or the considerations we have when choosing to invest in a particular place. There's some very obvious considerations like bandwidth, cost, or trade restrictions. You will never see us building a data center in places like Cuba or Sudan. But there's also some very interesting policy considerations here. For example, the human rights record of a country, the political stability, the rule of law. So we give you transparency into these reasons as well. We also give you transparency into how we respond to government requests. And here's our approach. We are of the view that governments should approach enterprises directly, not Google. But if despite this we receive the request, we will review each and every one against very high privacy and due process standards. This means applicable law, human rights, our own internal policies, appropriate scope. We have never provided and never will provide any backdoor to any government. We force them using encryption technologies to knock on the door when it comes to requesting data. Third is customer notifications. You have a right to know when government seeks your data. So we have battled in court for this right to notify our customers when governments approach us, and there's 2 recent cases that have been published in a blog post where you can see more details. Last but not least, we promote transparency. We publicize transparency reports with the number and the type of requests we get from governments around the world, and I'm happy to share that early next year we will start breaking down the number of requests that we specifically receive for both GCP and G Suite Cloud customers. What else are we doing to support your compliance? When you work on compliance, you know that sometimes the most important thing is not to comply, but to be able to demonstrate that you comply. And I can recall an example of a customer in a heavily regulated industry in financial services. They did a decent job in terms of assessing us. We have a bunch of conversations on data protection, on privacy and security, on technical capabilities, on everything. But when their financial services regulator knocked on the door, they were not able to demonstrate the job they did. They didn't have a documented risk assessment. They were not able to demonstrate which were the elements that they considered in terms of risk when moving to the cloud. So that put us in a less than ideal, let's put it this way, position with the regulator. And they had to start from scratch. So if you can take one practical tip is, when you're doing this, when you're working on this, make sure that you're able to demonstrate that you've done your work on security and compliance. It's super important. Not just doing it, but being able to prove. And that's why we regularly conduct independent third-party audits for accountability. This is the way we demonstrate our compliance. This is the way we demonstrate that what we say is true in our contracts, in our white papers. And this is the way in which you will be able to demonstrate before your auditors and before your regulators and your stakeholders that you're supporting your compliance with evidence. So this means that an independent third-party auditor comes and reviews our controls, our infrastructure, our software, everything surrounding the services. And they provide attestations, certifications, or declaration of compliance. So to give you a sense of our investment and commitment in this area, in the last year, over 2 million of control instances were audited at Google. Think about that scale. We're thinking about all global infrastructure operations, the software supporting the services. And by the way, when you think about third-party audits and certification, the scope is very important. So in this case, this is all of our services, all the infrastructure, all the operations, the personnel. You need to look, when you're looking at, in general, whether the scope of the certification is that, or is just a call center, or an office. So you need to look at the scope. When the auditor comes in, it takes a long time given the size, they will look at things like, in the ISO 27001 world, access controls. They will look at HR security, communication security, business continuity, physical security. They will check on those things and gather evidence on those things. Moving to the other standard, which is the more privacy-related, they will look at process or scope of processing, whether you're using data for commercial use or for your own purposes. They will look at things like the disclosure of subcontractors. They will check all of that. But now, in the ISO world, after you're examined against these stringent rules, which you can buy an ISO and read them yourselves, all you get is a badge. You just get a logo. That's why we produced the SOC 2 report, which is the most relevant to you. And the SOC 2 report is a 200 pages report with details into our operations, our physical security, our logical security, our personal security. It's a highly confidential document, but it's the attestation of everything that has happened. So on the one hand, you can see this is the standards that Google complies with, and you can check the standards, but also you have visibility into all those operations, so you can evaluate yourselves. We're also promoting more industry accountability in the cloud ecosystem. Things like GDPR and frameworks like GDPR require going the extra mile. So we're happy to share that we are partnered with industry peers like IBM, Cisco, Microsoft, Workday, and Oracle in creating the first cloud code of conduct. This cloud code of conduct is now sitting with a data protection authority for approval. We are doing the same exercise with the Cloud Security Alliance. And GDPR, for the first time, recognizes codes of conduct as means to demonstrate compliance. So this effort is super important to promote more accountability within the ecosystem. We're partnering heavily with industry peers there. Also, we've been supporting regulated companies at scale recently. We have facilitated a collective audit from financial services institutions that gave them the assurance they needed to move their most heavily regulated workloads to our cloud. Ultimately, we want to equip you to be able to answer these questions with confidence to your regulator. What are the security capabilities? How are you using my data? How can I control my data? Where is my data store? And more. But the most important consideration is that we are fully committed to continue to engage with customers and regulators around the world to make sure that our cloud is shaped in a manner that meets their expectation. So this is what we're doing to support your compliance journey, and we're just getting started. So with this, we'll give you some takeaways.
Thank you very much. Fascinating stuff. You know, having your data encrypted and then managing the key and all the access to the key yourself. So, yeah. So today we talked about the need to create an architecture capability, enabling the architect by putting them into the right place within the organization and thinking about a career path that would make sure this knowledge stays within your organization and help you on a long transformation and move into the cloud. Well, I've highlighted that, you know, having your requirements very well defined and documented and creating a pattern is just half of the task. You need to find a provider that can support your compliance, trust, security, and privacy requirements. And I think Nathaly made a very strong case for Google as a partner that can really support you in a very transparent way. So not only you can make sure that your requirements are addressed, but you can prove to your stakeholders, board, and regulators that you can achieve everything you want to achieve. Yeah, it's, you talked about very well about the structure of kind of risk management. If your third party is way ahead of you in terms of addressing regulatory and compliance requirements, that by moving to the cloud, you're inherently making your organization more secure. Yeah, and I really like the point about being able to demonstrate compliance using all the tools and materials Google's give you. I've seen a lot of you taking photos of the slides, and I'm sure it's all going to be available. So yeah, I think that's the takeaways. Would you like to add anything else?
Thank you very much for being here. And just when housekeeping, we love your feedback. So please make sure that you submit your impressions of the session via the app. Thank you very much.
Thank you.